Theresa May is desperate, apparently, to try and break this Brexit deadlock over the issues of sufficient progress, needing to show sufficient progress in key areas of the negotiations. And we can't move forward onto the future arrangements, free trade deals, until these areas are resolved. But actually, what does sufficient progress mean? It's a pretty subjective term. And Gerolf, why don't I ask you that? Does Europe really know what sufficient progress means? Or does it mean, is there a coherent sort of understanding of what it means? Or is it pretty much, you know, as individual politicians see it?
There is no rule whatsoever about that. But I would like to point out that you should not underestimate the strategy that has been formed or that has been designed behind the curtains by the guys like Mr. Verhofstadt, who comes from Flanders, just like I do. And to some extent also Mr. Barnier, who in the beginning was a well-informed and a well-considered reasonable guy, but who is also going in little steps going to this strategy of Verhofstadt, which is
And what is this strategy? Sabotage?
Sabotage.
And just explain that.
They even publicly voiced their hope that Brexit could be turned in an inverse, in another direction, going back to the Remain camp. And the Remain camp is actively here in this European Parliament, in these hemicycles. They are going to try to find a strategy towards the United Kingdom remaining in the European Union in some way. However,
what gives you that indication? Is it conversations you're having with people here in the European Parliament, or is
I'm not revealing. I'm sorry, but I'm not revealing any secret. It has been here in the European Parliament and also in the Belgian press, in the French press, everywhere outside the United Kingdom. It's quite common to talk about eventually sabotage the Brexit and the Brexit process. So the guys that are on the table now about sufficient progress, etc., are guys you should not trust to respect the vote of the British people.
They would obviously come back and say, look, we just want to ensure that the Brexit divorce commitments in terms of money are made, the obligations towards citizens in both countries, these are issues which need to be resolved sooner rather than later.
Of course.
I mean, where's the tactic in that? That's what I'm trying. Where is this playing?
The tactic is simple: postpone, complicate, turn it into a chaos, and then in the end, in some way, try to change the British politics into another referendum or anything like that. So they are now sabotaging the process, postponing the process, make it more complicated, recomplicate, and turn it into a chaos.
Stephen, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? You know, the sufficient progress effectively being a tactic more than anything else to try and, in some way, keep the UK in the EU? I mean, do you think that there is a clear agenda, honestly, in the European Parliament?
Oh, absolutely. There is a clear link between the European elitist politicians, whether you look at them as in terms of Juncker, Verhofstadt, and those like them, and those who are leading the campaign to stay in the European Union and the UK, from Nick Clegg and Tony Blair. And we've seen them meet here. We've seen them meet back in the UK. And I argued last week after Theresa May's speech that what we've now created is a zombie Brexit. And the zombie Brexit is really around the idea that really you have a Brexit in terms of the language coming out for some of the politicians. But when you look at 2019 and we supposedly left, we have all the EU rules incorporated into UK law, but we will still incorporate further EU laws. We will be paying 20 billion, continuing that. We will still be in the single market. We will still have freedom of movement.
That's not for an indefinite, that's for a finite period,
no, but
2 years.
But the key point, and this is leading on to what Gerald is saying, is that by the end of 2021, 2022, there will be a general election. And by that time, there will be a very strong Remain campaign-led election, that a new government will stay in the EU, and they could come to the EU very easily and say, look, we may have left technically through Article 50 and signed off, but it is ever so easy for us to join because everything is already in place.
Now, the European Parliament, as we speak, is currently drawing up a draft resolution supposedly highly critical of the Brexit talks. And this motion, it is said, is going to be discussed tomorrow in Parliament's main decision-making body and voted on by MEPs. And the idea of it to help guide the EU Council on whether sufficient progress has been made and whether for next month's summit they agree that we can move on to the future arrangements. Do you reckon, Gerolf, we'll start with you, that sufficient progress, the EU Parliament will declare in this motion, this resolution, that sufficient progress has been made on what we know so far of what's happening in the Brexit negotiations?
That is not the essential part of it. The essential part of it is that things will be complicated and that any kind of step forward will be a step into chaos. That's what they want. They want to postpone this Brexit until a political change in the United Kingdom. And
so that would be like
these resolutions and all that is written in it about sufficient progress or not sufficient progress is all part of their organizing the chaos.
The likelihood is then, if from what you're saying, is that they will probably, we should expect in the UK them to the Parliament to pass a motion saying that there hasn't been sufficient progress, and for the European Council to then take that to the summit next month.
These are two languages. The only thing I can say, United Kingdom, please go on and decide your own, not a hard Brexit if possible, but offer a gentle way to get out of it, but don't let the process be decided by the European Union, because the European Union, with resolutions like the one that we will vote or not vote tomorrow, is the only strategic option for the European Union is to postpone the whole process.
Stephen, your thoughts, the European Parliament, this is something that will come out and will be voted on by both of you.
Absolutely.
What are you expecting to be the outcome of it? This, of course, is significant to the European Council.
I will expect that this motion will come out and say there is insufficient progress being created, to apply more pressure in the way that Tusk did in front of number 10 and quite appallingly, in my view, yesterday. And really,
why is that appalling? That's surely
I think it was an insult to his British hosts to stand in front of the number 10 where the Prime Minister was and effectively dismiss her out of hand and dismiss the speech of last week out of hand. And that feeds into the overall argument. At the end of the day, Tusk is the person that's supposed to direct and control the negotiations on the next stage. And this is why I've always suggested that it's a deliberate attempt not to have a free trade arrangement run alongside, because they could give Barnier the powers to do so. Delay, obfuscation, and eventually an option to try and keep Britain in. And who we heard that before? Varoufakis.